after the fact. So Councilwoman, please go ahead.
Thanks so much, Amy, and good evening, everybody. Councilwoman Emily Benedict here, and I am so excited to get going on Burrus Street with the traffic calming program. Amy and her team work on traffic calming all over the city for us, and we've got a lot of projects in District 7. I'm excited to share with you that we have had more awards than any other district in the city, and we have a lot of applications that are out. And that are, we've got a number of awards that are in process, just like Burrus Street. So we'll be doing this a lot around the neighborhood, around the district for the next few months. And I'm excited to get some cars slowed down. This is the top neighborhood priorities, neighborhood safety priority that I have. I've said for many years, no child, no senior, and no one should be put in harm's way due to unsafe streets. So this will be helpful, and Amy's got plans for us. She'll run us through those, and then we'll hear from you with Q&A, as she'll describe in just a second. And I'll be listening in. I'm going to turn my screen off for the presentation, but I'll be listening in and looking forward to hearing from everybody. Thanks so much, Amy. And again, thanks to everyone who's here.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Again, I'm Amy Birch. I'm a traffic engineer and consultant that works with NDOT to facilitate the traffic calming program for the city. Also on the call on my team, we have Jordan Lipsey, and he's going to be monitoring the chat box, make sure if there's any questions that come in, I don't miss those, and we can go over that. So feel free to add questions if you have any in there, and we'll get to those, or we have a small enough group, you can certainly unmute and ask those as we go along. That's just fine. Like I said, we do record these meetings and we post them on NDOT's traffic calming website. At the end, I'll have I put the link in the chat box, but also at the end, I have a QR code and the website printed there, and we'll get to that. So we are here to talk about Burrus Street and the traffic calming project that is on this street. And first, let's do some a little bit of background information about what traffic calming is. This program, we call it a neighborhood street traffic calming program. We focus on residential streets exclusively, and this is really traffic calming is installing physical solutions that encourage slower speeds over the length of a street. So we're targeting through this program primarily speed reduction. We usually talk about the 3 E's of traffic calming. That's education, doing some public education about the importance of driving slow on all streets, but especially neighborhood streets, and as it relates to this program. And enforcement, that's the work that our police department does. They cannot be on every street at all hours of every day. So our program focuses on the engineering of this street and how do we modify the current street to encourage those slower speeds. Safety and Vision Zero is what is kind of the overarching idea behind the traffic calming program, because we know that there's a strong correlation between vehicle speed and a person's chance of survival if they're hit by a vehicle at that speed. So this graphic is showing that at 25 miles per hour, a pedestrian has an 89% chance of survival. But as that speed goes up to 35 and 45 miles per hour, there's only a 35% chance of survival. And this is national data. And another thing about speed and crashes is that there's more reaction time when drivers are driving slower. So those crashes can even be more easily avoided, but and when they do occur, they are less severe. So we're really targeting speed through this program. Because we know how dangerous speeding can be. This is a very popular program, as Councilwoman described earlier, and your area, your neighborhood has received a lot of selections, but as of August, we had over 500 neighborhood streets that had requested traffic calming. This is an application-based program, so people apply to get traffic calming, then it's those streets are all evaluated to determine which streets need it the most. So in our summer selection, NDOT selected 85 neighborhood streets to receive traffic calming. Typically, we select 25 streets about every 6 months, so 50 streets a year. But this past selection was especially large, and that's because the council dedicated a significant amount of dedicated funding directly to traffic calming, so that we could select more streets and get traffic calming on more streets across the city, because there's such a demand for traffic calming and a desire for that. So this map on the right is showing pink lines, just signifying which streets we have that had requested traffic calming, just to give you an idea of the density and how much demand there is. Outside of the traffic calming program, we always direct folks to the hub. And if you're not familiar with the hub, it's an excellent tool and resource to access all different agencies and departments within the city. So hub.Nashville.gov, dial 311 during normal business hours, or you can use the app. You can download the Hub Nashville app onto your phone. And great thing about this is it gets the service request to the right department. You also get a service request number, so you can follow up about that. So this is all sorts of things like clogged street drains, traffic light is out, there's a need for a stop sign somewhere, things like that. It's not just NDOT, it's all Metro departments. So back to traffic calming. And our prioritization, like I said a couple of slides back, we have a great demand for this program. And how do we select which streets are able to get traffic calming every round? And that's based on a data-driven process. We look at 5 main criteria to rank streets that have applied for traffic calming. So the bulk of the scoring is based on vehicular speed. We go and we measure the vehicle speeds on every street that's requested traffic calming, and we measure the 85th percentile speed over the typical residential speed limit, which is 25 miles per hour. The 85th percentile speed is the speed that 85% of the traffic is going that speed or below. So it means that 15% of the traffic is going above that speed. And I'll tell you in a minute what we measured on Burrus, but I just wanted to give you that perspective of what we're comparing here in this criteria. We also look at volume, that's daily traffic volume. And then we look at trip destinations, so places that are nearby or along the street where we would expect pedestrian traffic to occur. So that's things like schools, parks, and libraries, things of those nature, and where we would expect people to be walking to and from. We also look at whether or not there are non-driver accommodations on the street, like sidewalks, or if there are bus stops and bus routes near or on the street, and bikeways on the street. So that's part of our scoring as well. That makes up 10%. And then our last 15% is the vulnerable users and injuries and fatalities. So we looked back at 10 years of crash data and wanted to make sure that we were identifying those streets where pedestrian crashes are occurring, pedestrian bicycle crashes. So that's how our scoring works. And so from there, we look at the streets that score the highest, and based on available budget that's been allocated to the traffic calming program, that's how the selections are made. So Burrus Street was selected for traffic calming through that process. And So Burrus Street, our limits are Burrus Street between Maplewood Lane to the north and Hart Lane to the south. So when we did our data collection for Burrus Street, we found that the 85th percentile speed was 36 miles per hour. And that is where the speed limit is 25 miles per hour. Our daily volume is about 1,000 vehicles per day. That's the both directions of travel over a 24-hour weekday period. Then we also just look at what the street widths are, just to give you some characteristics of the street. The street width varies on Burrus a bit, but primarily it's between 21 to 24 feet. On that south block, it is more narrow down there. Then, of course, there's not any sidewalks on Burrus Street, and it's categorized as a local street. So here is our map of our street limits. So I'm showing Burrus Street here in the middle of the screen that's highlighted yellow over a green line. This map is taken from our online tracker of all the streets that have applied for traffic calming and what the status of those streets is in the program. So our legend here is on the left. All the pink streets are, oops, sorry, I bumped my mouse. The pink streets are streets that have applied for traffic calming but have not been selected. The green streets are streets that have applied for traffic calming and are in the process. They may be towards the end of this design process and outreach process and just waiting for construction, or they may be in the beginning of this process like Burrus Street, where we're having our first initial meeting with you all. So nearby, I know that Artie Street on the other side of Gallatin Pike is approaching construction, and Stratford Avenue. Those are some recent selections in the last round that are getting close to being installed. And then we don't see over here. To the left is blue dotted streets, and those are streets that have vertical measures installed. I think the one in the bottom left, kind of under my legend, is Jones Avenue, a little to the south. So now I'm going to talk about what's in our toolkit. What tools do we use? Our primary tool that we use are speed cushions for a number of reasons. They're easy to implement. They are well liked, and they're very effective. And we use speed cushions that have these gaps, as you see in these pictures, that allow for emergency vehicle response to not be as affected as if they would have to go over them, because their wheelbase is a little bit wider, so they can straddle the devices a little better. So I want to call your attention to a few things about these pictures. You can see that based on the width of the road, the striping of the road, we can configure these in a number of different ways. So in the top left corner of the picture, we have a set of two, so they're one in each lane. This picture is also showing our speed cushion warning signs. We always install those with our cushions to give drivers that warning that they should slow down and there's something in the road. Like this picture is showing, we often install them right next to the cushion to deter drivers from trying to drive around the device in the yard and things like that. Then the top right is a scenario where we don't have any centerline markings on the street, so we're showing arrows on the speed cushions. And then the one on the right down to the bottom is a scenario where we have a center line, we have a white edge line that's really a bike lane, I believe, and so we've incorporated those flexible white delineator posts to keep drivers from driving around the speed cushion in the bike lane. So just a little bit more information about these. The height of these are 3 inches high, and then they kind of ramp up on either end, and we can put them in various lengths from 7 foot long, 10.5 feet long to 14 feet long, but they're drilled into the pavement in these modular pieces. Speed tables are very similar to the cushions, except they don't have the gaps. You know, they're made of the same material and modular, and we'll typically use these on higher classification streets. They're called tables because they have a flat section on top. So they're longer, so they are a little smoother to go over, and that's why they're usually on the higher classification streets. So our vertical measures, we want to give you some information about how these are effective in Nashville. So NDOT has done some before and after studies on 6 streets around the county where these types of measures have been installed. And so the graph on the left is the average speed, and so we're showing the before speed in this study was 31 miles per hour, and then after the installation it went down to 22 miles per hour. And then the graph on the right is the 85th percentile speed, so where the average 85th percentile speed was 37 miles per hour. After these devices were installed, it went down to 25 miles per hour, which is really, you know, it shows us they're really effective. And these measurements are taken in between series of cushions, not right at the cushion. So we would expect that speed to be even slower right at the cushion. In our toolbox is also radar feedback signs, and these are just as they look, they're signs installed with speed limit signs, and they flash or they show your speed as you approach the sign. And if your speed is going above the posted speed limit, it will flash at you to give you that warning. They are effective. Another before-after study showed that the 85th percentile speed went down 7 miles per hour where these were deployed. So they're effective, and we use these in places where we maybe cannot use the vertical devices, streets that have volume that's too high, or where grade is a concern. With the speed cushions, we do have some limitations with grade on where we can place them. So this is another tool we have. We also have narrowing and through pavement marking. So there may be a case where there's no markings on the street. We could add white edge lines, or if there's white edge lines and still narrowing needed, center lines or something like that. Bulb outs and chicanes are tools that are typically more used in more urban areas where there's on-street parking, but the bulb outs will do painted striping to narrow or reduce the radii of an intersection, and tighten the crossing distance for pedestrians, and use those flexible delineator posts as you see in the picture. The chicanes are these 2 pictures on the right that are showing how we can add curvature to an otherwise straight street through markings and signage. And a lot of times this has been done on a street that's wide enough for maybe one lane of parking on one side of the street, and then the markings are done such that the parking alternates side to side of the street to create that horizontal curvature on the street. Traffic circles are devices that we install in the middle of intersections. They're circular and islands in the middle of the intersection that requires cars to drive around them in a counterclockwise fashion. Similar to roundabouts, but not, because they can be mountable for we would still have the stop signs on 2 approaches, and not not yield flow all the way around. But there are few locations where these are applicable, just given the nature and the size of the island, but it is something we look to do when and where that we can. So now I'm going to talk about our plan for, because that's our toolbox. I'm going to talk about our proposed recommendations for Burrus Street. And just to orient you on the map, north arrow is kind of to the right of your screen, and that is Maplewood at the right. I'm also showing where the stop signs are on Burrus Street. And then over to the left of the screen is Hart Lane. So that's at the south end of the street. Our symbols are the yellow C's there, and that's kind of the general location of where we would recommend installing speed cushions. So what we're showing is a series of 8 speed cushions, and in the top left corner is kind of a image of about what that would look like. And so we're talking about 2 cushions along the width of the street. In some locations where the street's wider, it might be a set of 3 instead. And again, they would be installed with the warning signage that will help also double as keeping drivers from driving around the device in the yards, because that does happen. We did learn that in some locations where curb is not present, and we don't have curb on Burrus Street. Like I said, this is a series of about 8, and that gives a spacing of about 400 to 500 feet between a set of cushions, and that's our kind of typical goals, what we're looking for. And that's because we don't want to put 1 cushion and then a long distance where there's nothing, because that might encourage drivers to just slow down fast at the cushion and then speed back up really fast. But if they can see the next one's coming, there's no need to speed between, and it encourages a consistent speed along the length of the street. So I might pause there, see if there's any questions about the plan, comments. Feel free to put those in the chat or unmute yourself if you have any questions. All right.
Amy, could you speak about placement relative to driveways?
Oh, that's a great question. I didn't mention that. We don't put these right behind a driveway. So we will space them about at least 15 feet away from a driveway, so that when you're turning into your driveway and out of your driveway, you're not driving over them sideways. So that's part of the design that we will look into when we get it more formalized. But yes, we don't put them right at driveways. We don't put them in the middle of intersections either. All right. If there's no other questions, I'll move on, and then we can have time for questions after.
Amy, a question just came into the chat.
Yeah, it's on the chat. It says, is it possible on Burrus to have the white posts rather than the larger signs?
We could look into that. We definitely have to have some of the signs, because they, we need drivers to be able to know that they are approaching those and have warnings. So, we can't just put the warning signs at either end, because there's so many cross streets that we want to make sure we give proper warning. But if there's a case where we can reduce some signage that way, we could look into that. But our standard is the signage, because they last longer. Those flexible delinear posts, they will get hit from time to time, and then it's more maintenance on the department to put that up. So we haven't done that lately with the delineator post. I think Gibson, that's somewhat near here is a north-south street, has speed cushions on it and has used some of that, those type of materials, but
I think,
we
Amy, a qualifying, I don't know, well, anyway, an additional piece of that would be where the cushions are. I think the concern would be that maybe, and Joni, you might chime in if I get this wrong, but so to avoid people driving around them and onto the shoulder, which there's not much of one, so you'd really be almost driving into somebody's yard. Most people aren't going to do that, and that's why, and maybe you touched on this and I missed it, but most people, the signs are partly to stop people from doing that, but also I think the placement of these is such that there's not room for that. Could you speak to that? Unless you already have, and I missed it, I'm sorry.
the placement is there's not room for these. You mean the signs?
No.
Yeah,
Oh, so if I'm in my car, yeah, so if I'm in my car and I want to go around the speed hump, how is it that we can restrict a car from driving onto the shoulder? And I think that Joni might have been getting at, can we have those posts to prevent that from happening? But I think also one of the things about the signs, so along the same lines here, the signs are typically there so that people, the signs also impede people from being able to drive around the speed humps. I think that's what we're getting at here.
Yes, correct. They kind of serve two purpose, and their original purpose, the signs, um, wasn't really to deter uh, drivers from going around them, but we found that that was effective if we placed them in the right place. There were some locations where we would place them a little bit in advance of the cushion. And then we found that if we put it right at the cushion, it helps. But we take into a lot of things like context about, like, proximity to driveways and we try to place signs such that they're not directly in the middle of someone's front yard. So we do try to be thoughtful about that if that's the concern about just, sign clutter and so forth.
I think you got it. Thank you.
All right. Let's see. So let's talk about our program flow and how all this thing is going to work. So our whole process, like I mentioned before, is an application process. We have 2 cycles per year where applicants can complete the application online and submit that for consideration for traffic calming. So this started with an application, and then we do our data collection and process all that data and identify through our prioritization process the selection. And then we reach out and schedule these neighborhood meetings. We're doing our neighborhood meeting now, and we send our meeting advertisements through the mail so that we make sure that we reach everyone on the street that's going to be affected by the project. So during this meeting, like we've done already, we've given our overview of the program, our toolbox, and our concept. And this is also where we listen and see if there's any questions about the plan and so forth. And then from here, we will go and put a more detailed design together. We do our field work to identify exactly where those cushion locations will go, and put that into a plan set that the contractor can use to install. So once we finish the design, we can go in directly to our ballot process. So the design may take a month or so, 2 months, perhaps, but from there, we can go into our ballot process. And this is how NDOT makes sure that there's support for this project on the street that we're working with. And I'm going to go into more details about the ballot, but essentially it's a vote by those that are property owners along the street. And if the ballot's successful, we move into the construction phase. So NDOT will order the materials and work with the contractor to get it installed. So when we're in this neighborhood meeting and then moving into the design, we have the option to have a second meeting if we think that's needed on our end to refine the design. If there's a lot of questions or changes to the concept that we've presented, then we would want to have a second meeting, or if the neighborhood would like, we can do that. So we can talk a little bit about that after I go through the ballot portion, but based on not having a lot of questions so far, it sounds like maybe we're kind of supportive of the plan, but we'll pause for that in a minute. But let me finish up and talk about how our ballot works. It's an online ballot, and we advertise that and send those ballots to the property owners on the street through the mail. So postcard mailers, they will have a unique ID code in the bottom right-hand corner and a QR code that takes you a link if needed, if the QR code doesn't work, but takes you to the online ballot, and respondents can vote yes or no. So you can vote yes for the project or no for the project. And from that link, you'll also be able to view those detailed plans on NDOT's website. So we make sure that those are posted for Burrus Street before those postcards go out. And it's a 6-week voting window. We put the closing date on the top of the card so that when you get that in the mail, when the ballot closes. And then if 66% of the respondents vote yes, then the project will move forward into the construction phase. So like I said, we put the closing date on there and not we put the closing date on there so that you can find out what the results are. NDOT posts the results of the ballot or all the ballots on the website, not individual votes or anything like that, but just the, what the percent total was for the result, for the vote.
Hey,
So
Ms.
the
Amy.
eligible, I have a question here about who gets the ballot. So here's our ballot zone. The eligible residents that can vote are the property owners that have property that abuts the street. So it's not the side streets, just those on Burrus. And I've highlighted here in 2 separate maps because it was too long to put it on one, but we have Hart to Kerdwood on the left and then Kerdwood to Maplewood on the right. And it's just property owners that receive the ballot. So if the property owner actually lives in Oklahoma, that's where the postcard gets mailed. It's not mailed it's not exclusively mailed to the property address. It's dependent on what the property owner's address is. And then it's just residential properties, churches and schools. We don't have that case on this street, but those also get 1 vote each. So then if we have an owner that owns multiple properties on a street, they're just eligible for 1 vote. And that's why we have the unique ID codes. We make sure that people don't forget and vote twice and have double counts and things like that. But that is the ballot zone. Any questions about the ballot or the eligibility of the voting? Okay, seeing none. I'm gonna put the my contact information here as well as the email address to NDOT's traffic calming manager, TrafficCalming.Nashville.gov.
Amy, I'm going to jump in with a comment for the community to know. I typically check in with NDOT midway through the balloting process to see what the votes look like that have been coming in. And I will say that, as I said at the top of the call, this is my number one neighborhood safety priority, is getting cars to slow down. And so I am supportive of this plan, and I will do all that I can to get this plan through. I absolutely will listen and take into consideration everybody's feedback, but I will say overwhelmingly this is desired by the district. And so therefore I'm going to be doing all I can to help support getting it installed as the final design comes out. Um, Two things that I can do as a part of that is that if for some reason the respondents look like they're not supportive, I'll be letting the community know that, so that we can make sure that everybody who is supportive has had the chance to respond and gets their vote, hopefully of support, turned in during the ballot process. And then the second thing was, Amy mentioned that potential second neighborhood meeting. I think and she mentioned that based on the questions or lack thereof on this call, that's usually indicative from our experience that it's supported in the neighborhood. And so, the, so I'm a fan of avoid of not having the second meeting if people appear supportive, because that second meeting slows the process down by at least one more month, if not longer, depending on how long it takes to schedule the meeting. So, which can sometimes add a 2-week buffer on one side of that. So the faster we can go through this, the faster we get the product installed. And I see in the comments that, the majority of the neighborhood association is supportive. I think that we'll see that again. This is, we have dozens of applications on file within the district. And so I will do all that I can to get cars to slow down. And this is the best method that we have today to do that. So,
Thank you.
there's my soapbox, and I'm here to let you know that I want this, and I hope that you do too. But certainly, if you don't, I do want to hear from you. And my contact information, we didn't include it, but I think everybody knows how to get me. If not, it's Emily.Benedict@Nashville.gov. Thank you, Amy, for this.
Thank you. A couple of,
May I add one more thing?
yes.
Sorry, I didn't say this at the top. This is a neighborhood-led program, and so there are neighborhood champions that did a lot of work to get this going, and I'm so grateful for you. So thank you to those who did that, and and that's a great example of how the community leads the projects that the community needs locally in their neighborhood. So thank you.
Great. A couple more things I would just add about the process is if on the ballot cards, if there's someone that isn't able to vote online for any reason, there's a phone number there. They can reach someone at NDOT to help guide them through that. And like I said, the plans will be posted on the website to be viewed to help inform votes. And we do the ballot because we want to make sure that there's neighborhood support. But I'll say that we've balloted well over 100 streets, and most streets are favorable for the traffic calming plan. I think it's like 92% or something, just for the most part. But we do have a few that don't pass the ballot, and that's maybe to be expected. But if that is the case, it doesn't mean like nothing happens. We might come in with lesser intrusive measures, like not vertical measures, but instead a series of radar feedback signs or something like that, or some striping or signage. So, just wanted to let you know what the opportunity is still for traffic calming if the ballot is not successful. But we want you to, if you live on Burrus, to receive your ballot card, vote, and remind all your neighbors to look for theirs and do it too. Because that's also part of our, making sure people know about the project in advance is getting that ballot card out and getting votes. So I think that's all I have. Here's the traffic calming website, TrafficCalming.Nashville.gov. This QR code will also take you there. That's where you'll find links to this meeting recording. We'll get that posted in the next couple of days. You'll be able to look at all the plans, and the Burrus plan, when it's ready, will be posted there. The results for ballots are posted at this website. Our toolbox and process manual is there. So just a lot of great information. Also, when it's time to open the application window for other streets that might be interested in applying for traffic calming, you'll be able to access the application from this website and find our online tracker to track statuses of all the streets that have applied for traffic calming or in process. So lots of information there, TrafficCalming.Nashville.gov. And we don't have any other questions. I'm going to check right here in our chat box. Okay, so I will also, one last tidbit, I will be in communication with the councilwoman as well as Joni, who's been our champion and coordinating with the meetings when these ballot cards are coming out and the plans complete, so that you can be looking for those. So we'll just try to give you all a heads up on that. And with that, I think we will move forward with preparing our final design and getting you into the ballot phase. Thank you so much for coming, and any of your neighbors wasn't able to make it, you can direct them to our meeting posted online. Have a good evening.